One of these days, I will need to ask myself, was it all worth it? I sit in the shadows of my dimly lit corner, preaching out another dark sermon of despair. I contemplate a deep fear. Have these stories become my chains, holding me back from ever becoming the heroic champion of my own epic tale? And what have I uncovered from these buried ancient sands? Our timeline does not extend straight out into an endless horizon. No, our time is curved, it is broad arcing, and it inevitably bends back overhead. It reaches behind and returns to latch back in place with its familiar origin. Behold, history repeats. All right, sure, don't be so hasty to skip another episode just yet. I can't relate to this new world. How the damn will I ever fit a 4-hour podcast into a TikTok? I can't dance for that long, and so I digress. Have you ever pulled a pin out of a live grenade? Holding that thin little pin helps me to rattle one of my next thoughts loose. And then, and only then, I put the pin back in. One of these days, I might just leave the pin out, holding the grenade against my head, and let all the thoughts rattle loose from the dark matter of my brain. Then I will feel some true historical context from OSE, the Asiatic Pacific Theater. When we visited those dreadful coordinates, what was that lesson I was trying to learn of what it means to be human? Was it something like the Japanese are just like everybody else, only more so? Now, you know it's rare for me to vent my frustrations, but who could have possibly guessed that tattooed covered freak Rob Zombie would beat me to this realization? I mean, what was it that he screamed in the 90s? That drivel, that MTV rubbish, but I'm pretty sure he was screaming something to the tune of more human than you, man. And for that matter, why is it? Axl Rose is trying to explain to me the antecedents leading up to the American Civil War. Who does he think he is? What we got here is failure to communicate. How dare you? What we've got here is how about you? Shut the fuck up. I'm sorry, I sincerely apologize. That won't happen again. I've already doubled my blood pressure medication, and honestly, I don't want to get lost finding more frustrations. Anyway, so for today, and for the 100th time, I failed to master what it means to become human, and I replaced that devilish, mocking, thin little pin, keeping the tension held down on the handle until another day. For now, I have uncovered another distant time deserving a scalpel for our next historical autopsy. You see, you must understand, most of my friends, those Civil War reenactment guys down by the soccer field, they're always telling me, stick with the topics that are crowd pleasers. Everyone loves your take on the Hitlers and the Himmlers, and listening to you rant for hours on end about starving Jews. You see, for this next topic, I'm going to offend everyone. I can't help it. It's like I have an affinity for it. Now, I must be clear here. History will always have more emotional sensitivity when it is observed by the generations of the near future. But with our case, this story is so recent. Many of them are still living today. You don't even need to double the age of my wife's grandfather to get back to visit these times. And with all full sincerity, I wish no ill will or harmful intent upon anyone. It's just that, unfortunately, I would not be able to fully explain. I mean, I would be doing a disservice to history if I failed to reconstitute all of the dried ink. I assure you, I only think about nothing but happy thoughts, rainbows and unicorns, all of the time. So if you feel my words cut too close to the funny bone, please remember my intent is only to entertain you, to intrigue you, but most of all, to humor you. Because if this story has taught me anything, a laugh can be a very powerful thing. And sometimes in life, it's the only weapon we have. Now, please allow me a moment to formally offer 2 short warnings. I already prefaced the first one for those of the faint of heart. This episode is more hardcore than any of my previous, and that should not be taken lightly. And believe me, I was mindful not to take advantage of any cheap opportunities to saturate these events with excessive horrors. And it's mostly for this reason why I had to put this examination off for all of these years. So proceed with the understanding that I would give this episode a rating of NC-17. And for my second warning, if you haven't yet viewed the 4-time Academy Award-winning film that we will be discussing, well then I suggest you do that first. But if that's of no interest to you and you don't mind, or maybe you even enjoy beginning your content right dab in the middle, well then you're free to make your own decision. So without further ado, I present to you The Framing of Roger Rabbit.
This is how we handle things down.
It's history.
Now.
My God!
Tell him he killed his brother. Dropped the piano on his head.
I'm looking for a murderer.
No, not at any time. Only when it was funny.
I always knew I'd get into it.
You don't know how hard it is being a woman looking the way I do. I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
It's hardcore history.
Does history care who's the innocent or who is evil? Does history care about the so-called heroes or the villains? Does history even have any self-awareness that it is a grinding piston, thrusting, torque leveraging, gas combusting machine, barreling relentlessly forward in spite of what or whoever gets in its way? Well, let me bring you back to Los Angeles, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Back in those days, people smoked indoors. A man could skip 2 towns and begin a whole new identity. Your birth-given race told you your place in society. You could straighten out a dizzy broad with a smack to the mouth. And best of all, you could get a shave and a haircut for only 2 bits. Back then, California didn't have any of those stickers warning you their products have chemicals that cause ambiguous gendering and constant forest fires. It was a modest time. It was the final heyday of our last great generation, and they just don't make them like they used to. But beneath this glossy rainbow-colored veneer, something was festering, a little place called Toontown, a place of mayhem, but more importantly, it was free. But that's never allowed to last, because a man named Judge Doom, and when he raises his brow, he will be answered to. Now, the pronunciation of Judge's name is still debated by most contemporary historians. Many lean towards pronouncing Judge with the soft G sound, but I have a number of cross-referencing points that leads me to believe that at this point in history it was far more likely that the people of this time, including Judge Doom himself, would have used the hard G sound, and that is how I will pronounce his name moving forward. And just for further linguistic clarity, and it may come to you as no surprise, but for our titled character, Roger Rabbit, my pronunciation will continue with the use of the hard R. Now, with attempting to understand Judge Doom, how does one determine what constitutes the human rights and reign of power over you? And then what happens if you inconvenience him? What might he declare? And I quote, "I'll catch the rabbit, then I'll try him, convict him, and execute him." End of quote. Isn't that just something a Clint Eastwood role might say? I mean, picture him in his later years, a little bit more chalky maybe. He would walk with a cane, but still have a strong presence, dressed in one of those fedoras, and covered in long, dark clothing, such like what I wore back when I was an investigative journalist. Doom was actually quite accomplished. He was staunch in his discipline and ruthless with his tactics. Even the DA was intimidated by him. Doom's work ethic was never in question. He was never afraid to get his hands dirty. Well, wet, maybe. He did prefer to keep them dry with a pair of thick, heavy-duty rubber gloves. Doom stored these tightly fitting gloves in the back of his white Bronco. I have here a detailed account to help us bring to life Judge Doom's personality, or should I say, his casual cruelty. It was recorded by a warehouse worker who, on his morning shift, witnessed Doom, and he then recorded it later that night in his diary. I also feel for contextual purposes it's important for you to understand that back during these times, a grown man keeping a diary was not gay. And he writes, quote, "This poor Toon Shoe only hired maybe a week and a half ago. I didn't know him or anything. I mean, we did have lunch together a few times. And now that he's gone, I feel awful about that joke I made. It was during our lunch break, and I was only trying to be playful. But I said something along the lines of, his favorite meal is eating dog shit. You know, because he's a shoe. He didn't deserve that. Anyway, I was loading a box of hand buzzers when from the corner of my eye, I saw Judge Doom prying at a gray barrel with painted skull and crossbones on the side. My head jerked from the jarring sound of the lid clanging against the concrete floor to see a crowd of bystanders forming around him. The helpless shoe was already clutched in Doom's iron grip. It squeaked raw primal terror, and its eyes were pleading for the mercy beauty it knew it would never receive. Doom slowly, methodically, lowered its vibrant colors into the dip, flesh bubbling, steaming screams, echoing of a soul being unmade. Doom's face was locked. He didn't blink. He was fixed to the shrieks of steady agony, until all faded into silence. No one moved, no one said a word. Doom then remarked sadistically with his blood-drained lips, "I am no monster. I am progress. Toons will either comply or they will perish. You call this solitary death a tragedy. When I'm done, 1,000,000 deaths will be a statistic." End of quote. This is amazing, inexcusable, and revealing. Now, you might think I am lingering salaciously through another's pain, but I want to ensure that you will be able to grasp this is the very grief and suffering that will bleed far into the generations of the future. This execution has haunted me into my adult life, and I know it's been well documented that all dogs go to heaven, but only how will I know if my desperate prayers have been answered? What a relief it will be when I am summoned to the afterworld and all Toons are there too. Now, with our opening scene out of the way and settled behind us, and you think you know how history will play out, aren't you just so confident? The seer behind the crystal ball, all in spite of every moment of their free will. You probably think they're scripted characters, don't you? So I will leave it up to you to sort what's fair from what's injustice, up from down and right from wrong, and Judge Doom is dead wrong. And the rabbit? Well, maybe the rabbit really was framed. Oh, by the way, let me take a moment here to give kudos for already knowing the meaning of the word framed. Of course, we all now know framed is obviously defined as the means to produce false evidence against an innocent person so they appear to be guilty. However, at the time, though, I'm not so sure how any of the other children watching this cartoon could have possibly known there was an alternative definition for the word we used to put our pictures in. I mean, really. How many random meanings can a third grade word have? This confusion turned out to be a whole other missing puzzle piece for me in this noir detective mystery. This Toontown was not going to be anything like my more familiar and more welcoming Sesame Street. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not worth getting sidetracked over anymore. Anyway, so you have surmised Doom is the villain. Is he? No, this is just how one is. Like a judge, empowered to pass down judgment. So how would Judge Doom go about erasing Toontown off the map? You remember how we always thought there wasn't a way to kill a Toon? Well, Doom found a way. Turpentine, acetone, benzene. He calls it the dip. He will melt all those colorful pastels together like bloody watercolors and make us a nice comfortable drive to the coastline. He will create a wasteland and then he will call it peace. Does that make him bad, or was he just drawn that way? I've spent many sleepless nights dwelling over this question, and my producer Ben and I have come mostly to an agreement here that history will never care how you were drawn, or if they put rocks in your scotch. Instead, we are all just subjects placed one by one in front of the human being lawnmower. Chop, chop, cut down, dead from each swing from his gavel. If I can break here for a moment, I would like to share with you a relevant experience I had. I can recall asking a professor at university the question, what is the greatest barrier today that prevents us from understanding the perspectives of the people from the past? He only needed 4 words to give an answer, and so he clutched his bag tightly and replied cautiously, "Do I know you?" This was last October. I was on holiday. I just so happened to be passing through the area, and that professor's answer was so profound and yet so simple. I still question how I had not realized it myself. Do I know you? Now, I had a follow-up question, but that professor must have had obligations elsewhere. He was gone before I could look up from my deep introspective stupor, leaving me alone, in solitude, with my thoughts, in the faculty parking lot. How could anyone ever expect to understand people from distant times when, in all honesty, we can't even understand ourselves? I can't with any true conviction proclaim that I even know who I am myself. Oh my God, what if I'm not a real boy? So, look, To think we could possibly know what they thought or how they felt in their time about the events we will never experience as tangible is a baseless presumption and a waste of conversation. This is destiny. Fate chooses them. Do you really believe Stalin could have just as simply become a travel destination consultant and then do what? Be a model employee, rise to regional manager, make partner, retire, and die happy? Not in my world. Alexander, Caesar, Genghis Khan, Judge Doom. These great men will have their whole lives written in history before the ink even has a chance to dry. And so I bring before you the fate of Judge Doom. Wait, it just hit me. From right out of left field, I thought of another one of those what ifs. It's all so fascinating. I take a look back into history, I pontificate permutations, and then I get in one of my moods, because if you're anything like me, then you probably enjoy teasing around with the sequences of historical events and then trying to wrap your mind around and wonder what if. Not for that one blessed transformative moment, then where would we all possibly have ended up today? And so maybe you wouldn't mind playing a quick what ifs game with me. Picture, what if we were in 1940? What if we were in East Germany? And what if I spoke fluent German? What would I say? And what if in this game I am Adolf Hitler? Would the sheer feat of maintaining your undivided attention for 7 hours be my Mein Kampf? And then ultimately, would I finally understand what it means to become superhumanely inhuman? Best believe in this what ifs game, if I could, I'd kill me as a baby. Wait, sorry, you got to give me a second here. It's these types of tangents that Ben cuts me off after 3 whiskey sours. Man, history under the influence. Am I right or am I right? Mein Kampf, what funny words. Doesn't that sound like it comes with a side of fried rice? God, I'm hungry. Anyway, let's keep it together, Dan. Let's get back to the Western Hemisphere before I completely derail my Auschwitz-bound train of thought. And so I bring before you the fate of Judge Doom. If you would allow me a moment to quote myself, quote, a fly in the ointment, end of quote. Meaning an outside force creating a disruption, or in Judge Doom's case, an outsider putting an end to his vision. And so from Doom's perspective, he was the ointment that was spoiled by a fly, named Eddie Valiant. But how could this be possible? Eddie is generally understood to be a lost soul who once meant well, but he has since lost his grasp of any humanity and has thoroughly replaced it with soaking himself in contempt and alcohol. His cold existence was paved before him with the abrupt severance of his beloved brother. A tune killed him, ripped him away forever, just as fast as a piano can drop. Who knew a tune could have such a twist in their humor? Never again would Eddie find any purpose to live. He would have been found dead in a ditch if it wasn't for the L.A. Suicide and Crisis Hotline. Despite Eddie's miserable luck, there was one particular full-time operator, or should I say guardian angel, who over time grew to know him quite well. They even referred to each other by name. All the other operators regularly hung up on him for clogging up the line, but this one operator had such sympathy and offered so much needed support that she became his personal savior and trusted confidant, and likely his only true friend. Now, these volunteers were encouraged to take notes during their phone calls. Having access to previous information would be a valuable resource when helping people in such need. I have here a copy of a leaked document retrieved from the actual home of that very hotline operator. I'll read here a short excerpt from one of her early entries of Eddie expressing his pain and desperations. And she writes, quote, "These problems surround me. A lot of things upset me, as my soul rejects, enemy of myself, physically enslaved by the luxuries of this world. So I behave like a man inside the grave, whose life is lost. I swear to God, I want to just slit my wrists and end this bullshit. Throw the magnum to my head, threaten to pull shit. I would do anything to see my brother again. I need my brother back. When I say a big quote, I'm only bigging up my brother." End of quote. It states here, his drunkard ramblings continued into incoherent sobs. These words, these demonic thoughts were truly an oblivion of torture that apparently she was not prepared to handle. And so she did go on and take her own life. Eddie's life continued to get harder with his growing, inconsolable pain. Nothing seemed to fit. He felt he didn't belong, like he had endlessly been trying to rationalize with a pack of monkeys. So now, if you want to imagine our Eddie Valiant, you're going to need to envision a strong Charlton Heston character from the Planet of the Apes. Now, Eddie isn't very well fit or aesthetically attractive or have any real rugged stoicism or is even an astronaut, and he's certainly not sober, but he is frustrated in an unknown world with no one to relate to, which often leads him blurting recklessly out at others, regardless of the color they were drawn. Quote, "Take your stinking paws off of me, you damn dirty ape," followed by sympathetically, "Come on, don't cry. I don't hate you. I'm sorry for the time I yanked your ears. Yes, for all the times I yanked your ears." I have another primary source to help us flesh out who Eddie Valiant was in his day. This was originally printed in the Los Angeles Times. I retrieved it from the State Depository microfilm collection, and it appears this reporter was trying to make a name for themselves by doing some investigative journalism and likely agitating Eddie with some intrusive and insensitive questioning. I have Eddie's reply here, quote, "Yeah, that's right. I used to be a clown, and I earned my way up all the way from the bottom of my red rubber shoes. Me and my brother, John Wayne Gacy. Look, don't you dare say another word about my brother. No one in the clown community has ever had any respect for those kids. You're fair dodging on the back bumper of this trolley just to harass me? You, sir, are pathetic." End of quote. Now, with all of my extensive research detailing his adolescence, it's clearly evident that throughout his childhood, Eddie only received absent. And if not absent, then vacant extensions of affection and nurturing. The original historians and records of the time were more than detailed. Eddie would be most accurately described as a soul agonizing in perpetual despair. And it makes me curious. I can't help but to think. I mean, I have this constant idea mulling around in my mind. It's a theme I've seen so often through history, but certainly not a topic I would ever want to pursue. And so, I have another best-selling book idea I am willing to offer you. Now, I can't promise that you will be allowed to retain any of your visiting rights, but if you have the tempered balls of a Spartan, then I have no qualms with giving it away and passing off the reins for you to find out where it leads. And I assure you I want nothing to do with it. I wouldn't touch this if I were wearing a pair of Judge Doom's gloves. Actually, now that I'm thinking back, I'd be curious to know if anyone has yet to take me up on my last amazing book idea. It's been quite some time now. You know, that one where I pitched about how Hitler was just such a cool guy, because I'm really looking forward to reading that one. Well, let me know if anyone has seen it out there. Anyway, back to my new book idea that's up for grabs for whoever wants to run with it. And this idea also comes with an opportunity to conduct a simple experiment, one that could be used to gather empirical data to strengthen your thesis. So if this sounds intriguing to you, I suggest you start with the quote. And I quote, "Great men are almost always bad men." End of quote. It was coined in the late 1800s by the illustrious historian, politician, and writer John Dalberg Action. I'm sorry to interrupt momentarily here, but isn't that the most badass birth-given name you ain't never heard? John Dalberg Action. If they just happened to have a recording device back then, you couldn't stop this man from becoming the robber baron of pornography. John Dalberg Action. Now that's a man who commands the theater. But anyway, I don't want to get lost in all of the footnotes of history. So my new pitch that great men are bad men and that well-behaved women are seldom to make history. An additional quote from Laurel Thatcher Ulrich, another like-minded historian. Don't great minds think alike? Only just don't. I wouldn't leave them alone in a room together. Anyway, this is a theme that has been woven within the fabric of our human nature, but for some reason or another, this feature of heredity, wielding a lust to derail all others' trajectories, has only been expressed by the rarest of the very few. Okay, are you ready, you basement geek overlords? The odds are, let's say if you were to roll all of your Dungeons and Dragons dice, every single one of them would need to land on 20, even the 12-sided ones. So could this very genetic code be found in all of us, lying dormant like a silent predator until just the right particular set of environmental circumstances, and then the awakening, causing a monumental breaking of the stasis, leaving everyone entombed under the fallout? Revolutions, renaissance, cataclysms weren't caused by, no, not a movement led by the masses. This is the sole singularity that will orchestrate them. This idea is reminding me, bringing me back to when I was younger, we were learning about castles and medieval moats. I was sort of ridiculed for asking, but I had this natural concern. How often did the crocodile climb up the drawbridge? And it wasn't all that completely embarrassing because I was still a child and all. It was at my medieval-themed costume birthday party. The valiant knight hired to host ordered me to sit in the corner with my dunce cap. I've done a lot of research since then. So anyway, my point is that this sleeper agent gene of ours is like the Nile crocodile, who, by the way, lives usually in the Nile River and can remain dormant for years, able to press down on the pause button of life like a self-induced coma, while many other animals around are having life cycles coming and going. But this patient reptile doesn't hunt, they don't fight nor flee, they just wait. And when that deceptive, almost death-cheating moment arrives, they lash out with all the fury you would expect from a beast who walked among the monsters of the Triassic. But in us, rather, it's a gene becoming alive. Now, in order to conduct the aligning experiment for this book idea that greatness is spawned from evil, you're going to need to have two children. Because every experiment needs a control. And your other child, you still love them and all, but now they live in the backyard, perhaps in a trench. I don't know. That will be up to them. And every night before you go to bed, you walk outside and remind them that they were adopted. Given ample time, you may become the proud parent of a relentlessly ambitious virtuoso with unyielding power to revolutionize the world with how they see it should be governed. Now, there's too few documented accounts to prove with any certainty, but there are many contextual clues within my records that leads me to believe this is precisely how Anthony Fauci was constructed. Thank you for bearing with my meandering tangent. I felt compelled, since Eddie Valiant would be a fitting case study for this nature versus nurture paradigm. Now, where did we leave off? Oh, that's right. We left off with Eddie and his dismal upbringing and less than promising future. He had made his Murphy bed, and now he's going to sleep in it. He continued to live an unsavory life of ill repute and become, by definition, a scum bag. In his line of work, this did not bother him all that much, as he also identified as a professional dick, a disreputable private eye whose work ethic could barely keep the lights on. Eddie was a pathetic, weak man who would cave before any sleazy opportunity to make a buck, even if it meant lurking in alleyways and peeking in windows to procure evidence of a wife's infidelity. Simply put, he had no moral issues with voyeurism for cold hard cash. However, if we are being honest here, I feel comfortable in considering myself a voyeurist. I mean, a historical voyeurist. Yeah, I cannot deny how much it excites me to use the mind's eye to look deep within all these graphic, pivotal days of old. I stand behind it. I can admit it. Look, a couple of nude photographs of a Jessica Rabbit, that just might make my month. My wife only let me touch her once, and somehow we have 2 children. So, yeah. Why not? I'd probably take a few liberties if my profession granted me access for a little ogling at some long-legged centerfold. This is my life we are talking about. What, you don't think I would snap a few Kodaks of Cleopatra and Mark Antony if I just so happened to be walking past their resting chamber, listening, hearing their feverish raptures? Whoa, baby, Egyptian Roman sex, that's hot. God, that's what the doctor ordered. Jessica Rabbit was my childhood Marilyn Monroe, and don't try to shame me for that. Don't try to take that away from me. I guess maybe for you youngins, Jessica Rabbit was instead your Saved by the Bell show. go girl. And for Christ's sake, for most of you, your Jessica Rabbit is Dylan Mulvaney. Don't you dare think you're so high and mighty as if you're telling me through this very speaker you would refuse to hang on every one of my words if a little ancient patty cake was to be my next topic for our historical theater. Who are you fooling? I would have all you little birdies eating from out the palm of my hand. So for your own good, hear my edict. Never dare request a topic from me. Why would I take your requests? Most of you are just freeloading, copying, pirating, and sharing in the shadows, and so you have decided I am long dead with no earthly use for my compensation. Listen up, Cupcake. I stand here more alive and in the flesh than every single soul I've resurrected from the forgotten depths. So no, I will not take your requests. I will, however, accept your traffic to my website. How do you think you'd appreciate it if instead I bolstered merchandise and adverts to break up our ancient discussions? Who knows? Maybe it just might tickle me pink to implore to you how, after a long session of arranging my Green Army miniatures for their World War II campaign, that I really enjoy replenishing myself with AG1 just after I ripped you from your family, sold you at auction, chained you to the bowels of this godforsaken ship, and left you swallowed in the endless seas of the Atlantic. Where are we going? I don't know. It's all so uncertain. Well, let me tell you, we're going to ZipRecruiter.com because I need to plead with you to hire somebody, anybody, for whatever reason. I don't care. How about you hire somebody to do your job so you stay at home and we can continue our conversation? We had a good thing going here and you had to go ruin it because you have never given me one red cent. Yeah, well, isn't it funny how history tends to have a way of reaching back overhead and sneaking up behind you? Maybe if you were more like me, you would be alpha brain, black label, bitch. Oh no, I'm sorry. Am I being too rough with you? Let me extend my apologies with a BetterHelp promo code. So now that we have finished enjoying all these legitimate advertisements and being thoroughly impressed with the smooth access of making payments from our Ridge wallets, please allow for us to return back to our regularly scheduled program. So, who is the villain? Who is the hero? Eddie Valiant is no hero, a bit of a drunk, a man haunted by the shortcomings of his own making. He hates everyone, and no wonder. If a tune killed my brother, I would hate me too.